I'm Devin, 22, from Erie. This happened over one weekend in late September in Allegheny National Forest, Pennsylvania. We had just finished finals and wanted a cheap campout near Kinua Creek. It was me, my girlfriend Mara, and our friends Theo, Lena, and Owen. On the way down US 6, we stopped at a roadside place outside Kane called Triassic Trails. Titans of Deep Time. That stop started everything. I am writing this because I need a record that isn't just what I replay in my head at night. I know how this sounds. I'll stick to what we saw, what we heard, and what we did. I won't dress it up. Triassic Trails looked half dead. The parking lot was cracked and wet. Inside were sun-baked posters, a glass case with dead stink bugs, and a gift rack with melted keychains. Most of the dinosaur figures were faded and chipped. One wasn't. It was an Acronsaurus, big theropod with a ridge of spines down the back. The gums looked wet. The teeth had a fine crazing like cracked glaze. The eyes were amber, not cartoon-colored. There was a metal base with a plaque about a sound demonstration that was temporarily offline. Owen touched the base and jerked his hand away. He said it was vibrating. I put my palm on it and felt a faint hum under the metal, not loud, but there. A staff door nearby was locked with a chain, and the chain links were warm to the touch, like something had been behind the door recently. No employees were around. Outside, at the edge of the lot, 3 stones were laid across a little footpath with even spacing, as if someone had arranged them with a tape measure. We laughed at that and got back on the highway. We turned south at Kinzua Bridge State Park and took Forest Road 321. Theo said he knew a clearing where nobody camped. He said his older brother used to hunt the area and showed him a dry rise above Kinzua Creek. The drive-in was normal. Green hemlock stands, maples flaring early, ferns at waist height. A faint-to-tone whistle followed us for a mile or two. I noticed it because it matched the gap between my turn signal clicks. It wasn't close. It moved in and out of hearing and then went away. We found the rise and pitched a tents. Coyotes started up at dusk. We ate chili from a pot and took pictures standing on an old logging cut. We didn't drink. I want that clear. Right before sleep, something moved through the air in a way I felt more than heard. The tent skin dimpled like someone exhaled slowly against it. The coyotes cut off mid-yip. We lay there, listening. No steps, no branches snapping. I told Mar it was just wind pressure dropping. We slept. Morning had that early fall bite where breath shows for a second and then disappears. Sun came in low over the creek and lit the mist. We packed light to hike toward an overlook Theo promised was 10 minutes upstream. That was the joke of the trip. Everything was always 10 minutes away. The forest looked good, then small things started to feel off. Birds began songs and cut them short. Squirrels froze on trunks and stayed there too long. Mara stopped me with a hand on my elbow and pointed at the ground. A line of stones crossed the game path. The spacing matched what we saw at Triassic Trails. We stepped over and kept going. We reached a clay bank by the trail and saw parallel scallop scrapes 4 feet apart. Each pocket had a short black hair pressed in. Not soft like deer hair, stiffer. Owen took photos. The clay under his fingertip looked fresh, not dry or cracked. As we moved on, the path we had just used was blocked by fresh, green branches. Snapped clean. The leaves were still full and uncurled. I know what windfall looks like. This wasn't that. A thin drag line ran straight as a pulled string through ferns and leaf litter, then disappeared under a dead limb. I started to taste metal at the back of my tongue. My sinuses felt pressurized. Lena wiped her nose and showed me a thin thread of blood. She passed it off as dry air. The air was damp. We argued about turning back. Mara didn't like what she was seeing. I didn't either. Theo wanted one more ridge because he swore an overlook was just ahead. While we went back and forth, a whistle came from the trees on our right. It wasn't bird song. It sounded like someone copying Mara's last words, stretched out and breathy. Back now. The hair went up on my arms. We turned around as a group. A new stone line that wasn't there an hour earlier forced us around a rotting game fence. The fence post leaned inward and the wire sagged low. The detour funneled us into a fern bottom between two hemlocks. That's where we saw it. It was between the trees. Broadside, tall back with a jagged ridge, cold green hide, pale scar lattices across the flank. The head turned in a slow, controlled way. An amber eye blinked with a sideways membrane and then cleared. It exhaled. The smell was iron and tar with a little ozone. No theatrics, no roar. It looked at us in a way that recognized shape and distance. It took 2 steps that didn't feel like a charge. More like it wanted us to move along a line. It didn't hide. It didn't posture. It watched where our feet went. A small deer ran out of cover to our left like it had been pushed. The thing flicked its head and the deer folded on itself. I heard wood break, but there was no wood. The deer kicked twice and stopped. The thing did not feed. It let us see it and what it could do. That's when Theo ran. He grabbed Lena and yanked her uphill. Owen followed them. Mara said my name and I moved down slope with her, aiming for the trail head spurt in the car. Splitting wasn't a plan. It just happened because everybody chose what looked like daylight. I don't remember the exact route, just branches hitting my face and hands, and the sound of breath too loud in my own ears. Something at throat height caught Owen's camera strap behind us, and he swore hard once. I called his name. No answer. A thrum rolled through the trees again. My teeth chattered like I was cold. It messed with control in a small way. Fine movements felt jumpy. 2 whistles came from opposite sides. The same 3 syllables spaced out. The same words we'd said. Go now. I know a person can throw a voice. This was too far apart. We reached the small dirt lot near the spur. My Subaru was there with a dusting of leaf grit. I hit the fob. The chirp echoed down the trees. A slower version of the chirp came back, not electronic. Mar got on the passenger side. I slid behind the wheel, jammed the key, and turned. The engine caught. The thing walked out from a shadow along the edge and came up beside my door. It breathed. The inside of the glass fogged where its breath landed, which I can't explain. Threads of saliva hung between its teeth and vibrated with the engine idle. The eye tracked me. The pupil narrowed, then opened again while it studied heat through the glass. I looked down at my hands on the wheel and back up at its mouth. I did not move. It did not snap. It left us and turned toward motion in the trees. Theo and Lena burst into the open at the far edge of the lot. The thing pivoted with a little hip shift and started toward them at a speed that didn't match its size. I hit the gas. Gravel kicked. The rear swung wide and corrected. In the mirror, I saw the sail ridge for a second, then nothing but branches. We shot onto Forest Road 321. Another thrum hit the windshield and the edges crackled white like ice starting. I kept the wheel still and eyes forward. We didn't stop until Warren. We pulled into a 24-hour laundromat because it was open and had lights. Mara was sick in the bathroom for a while. I dialed 911 and said we'd seen a bear attack. When the dispatcher asked for the location and details, I found myself saying the real things. Stones across the path, fresh green brakes, a deer bent the wrong way, whistles repeating our words, a big animal with a ridge down the back. She asked again if I meant a bear. I said no. She put me on hold and came back with a plan to meet at Kinua Bridge State Park. To Pennsylvania State Police cars, a game commission truck, and a U.S. Forest Service ranger met us at the park lot near the visitor center. One of the troopers rode with me back down FR 321 while the others followed. Mara stayed at the office with a ranger. I drove slow. I told them where to pull off near the trailhead spur. We moved as a group step by step with spotlights and one hand held thermal. The creak noise came up from the dark like a constant line. They found the deer where we saw it go down. The cut was one motion and clean. No tearing. No scattered gut pile. That's not how I've seen bear kills look. 50 yards farther, they found Owen in a shallow draw. He was inside a new stone line that formed a narrow throat in the terrain. I won't write details. I will say it was fast, and he did not leave marks that showed a long struggle. The Game Commission officer said, "We needed to push toward the old game fence because a narrow culvert by the creek would be the best corner in the area." We moved that way with the troopers in front and the ranger covering the rear. The spotlights hit the ridge line first. The animal paced the fence line and then turned its head flat to us like a bird sighting down something. It made a low two-tone shape of our radio squelch back at us. The Game Commission officer shouldered a rifle he carries for large animals. One trooper had a 12 gauge with slugs. They waited for a clear angle that wasn't toward any of us. Sirens from the cars up on the road started. The animal slid into the narrow run toward the culvert and then tried to push past the head wall. The concrete chipped and popped. The first shot hit the shoulder, the second hit over the ribs. There was a drawn-out exhale and a different kind of rattle like steam leaking. The pressure feeling faded between one breath and the next. The animal sagged to one side and went still. We found Lena upstream near boulders at a bend. She did not make it. Theo was under a log jam farther on with a broken wrist and a bad shock response. He kept saying he had heard our words whistled from behind him and then from ahead like there were two positions moving. He confirmed what we saw and what we heard. The authorities taped off the area and called more people. I drove back to the park office and sat with Mara while she filled out statements. We both gave blood alcohol tests. We were clean. They took my clothes and gave me a paper suit. I kept my shoes because they wanted the prints to match my tracks. The official reason for the closure of that corridor was unstable structure and hazardous wildlife. The next week, Triassic Trails shut its doors and swapped the acro picture on the website for a mammoth. The page said refurbishment. A Game Commission officer called me later and said off the record that DNA tests didn't match any known North American animal. He told me not to repeat that part, then told me anyway that I should avoid that part of the forest for a while because sign sometimes turns up in clusters. He didn't sound like he was repeating a script. He sounded tired. We held a service for Owen in Erie. Lena's family held one in Pittsburgh. Theo came to both with his arm in a sling and did not speak it either. Mara stopped waking up shaking after a couple of weeks, but she still won't sit next to a window at night. I went back to Kinzua Bridge State Park with her at noon. One clear day, we walked out onto the skywalk where the old viaduct fell years ago and looked over the tops of the trees. It's a clean view with good distance. No tricks. I took two flat stones from the edge of the path and set them on the railing side by side. I said their names. We stood there a few minutes and left. I haven't camped since. People ask what it looked like. I give standard words so I don't have to argue. Big sailback reptile eyes, long teeth. The more important parts don't fit in quick answers. It placed stones. It snapped live branches at the right height to catch a throat or a strap. It copied patterns we made without needing to be close. It chose who to chase and who to ignore. It tested glass and heat. It didn't waste motion. That is what I tried to forget. The other thing I tried to forget is how the forest went from normal to wrong in small steps before anything big happened. If you hike and the birds keep stopping me dong, if the squirrels don't run, if the air pushes your teeth like a tuning fork, turn around then. Don't wait for something visible. By the time you see it, you're already where it wants you. I don't have a lesson that makes this neat. There is a file somewhere with our statements and an empty space where the right label should go. There are concrete chips on a culvert head wall and a section of old fence that leans at a different angle. Now there are two stones on a rail at Kinzua Bridge State Park that tourists probably move without a thought. When I sit at night and the house is quiet, I remind myself of what the final scene looked like in full light. Troopers, a Game Commission officer, a ranger, equipment, procedure, people doing their jobs, and an animal that stopped moving. That was the end. The rest is only what it took to get there and who did not make it back. I can't stand the thought of the creek noise at dark anymore. So I don't go. I keep the story plain because that's the only way I can keep it at all. I'm not law enforcement. I am the guy they call when a trail head sign falls over or a water cache needs to be hauled before sunrise. Contracted seasonal maintenance. White truck, clipboard, keys that never leave the lanyard. This all started on a late summer afternoon at the yard when the heat index board still read 112 at 4:16 p.m. The radio net was quiet except for the usual check-ins. Trail work crew clearing tamarisk near the marsh. A camp host calling in a toilet paper shortage. One ranger on patrol out near Yaqui. I had the Jasper Trail assignment. Move sealed gallon jugs down from Culp Valley so there'd be fresh water for a vehicle recovery at first light. Some hiker had tried to drive a low clearance out of the wash and cracked an axle. The incident got a pre-log number, but nothing formal yet. My job was just logistics. In this park, that's 90% of survival. Right-sized water in the right place before the wrong thing happens. I signed the cache manifest, checked the spill kit, topped the bed cooler with ice, and pulled the spare key fob out of the glove box where someone before me had taped it with blue painter's tape. Habit said, tuck it into the chest pocket and clip the lanyard. So, I did. The temp needle on the old Ford climbed a little on Montezuma grade like it always did when the air wasn't dry blast and the AC was set to high. I pulled it off max, cracked the window, and kept the fan aimed at my collar. The cab smelled like sun-cooked vinyl and pine cleaner. I watched the road shimmer and reminded myself about work, rest cycles. 20 on, 40 off in this heat. If you can stand the schedule. Out past the pull out, the light went slate cold and then thin. The kind of twilight that flattens everything into the same bad decision. I dropped into Culp Valley, took the dirt spur, and eased into the washboard of Jasper Trail with the truck in second, tires letting out that familiar gravel talk. I saw the headlamps from a long way off, 3 steady white points floating in line along the shoulder above a shallow draw. It wasn't how visitors move. Tourists fuss the beam around and stop to take pictures that never come out. These move smooth and deliberate, like they already knew the ground and were checking their pace to each other. When I rolled closer, they stepped into the wash and raised arms to flag me down. The one in the middle had a handheld radio clipped under his chin the way we do for long nights. It looked right until I got within 20 yards and saw the plastic was cheap. Blister pack kids grade. No antenna whip. No call sign sticker. No nothing. The middle one leaned in and said they were volunteers helping the sheriff on a search. His voice had the right urgency, but none of the details. We've got a patient up wash, dehydrated, non-ambulant, we need to move him to the highway now. No time for paperwork. I let the window sit halfway down, eyes on mirrors, hands where he could see them. I asked for the incident number. He said they were staged out of the sheriff's substation in town and didn't have it. I asked who the incident commander was. He said there wasn't one yet. It was a soft start. Behind him, the guy on his left was holding a translucent jug by the neck. In the slant from my headlamps, it wasn't full and it wasn't water. Amber, viscous, a little glint of something that caught the light wrong. Fuel smells different in this heat, and it gets into your head fast. I caught a whiff when the wind turned. I explained policy. No transport without ranger approval. No ad hoc patient movement without a form and a recorded accept chain of custody on property if anything was being taken with the patient. He smiled like I was the kid who'd memorized the rules. Time is life, he said, and reached a hand through the window to my key ring. He did it like people do when they think they're fixing something. Just a quick, confident grab, and those keys were off the column and in his palm. My chest went flat and cold. I don't carry a sidearm. Maintenance doesn't rate one. The only thing that's mine in a truck like that is the line between my hands and the rest of the night. I didn't argue. You learn to work things back, not break them off. She runs hot, I said. If she idles a while in this heat, you got to prime the fuel a little. Hood prop sticky. I can show you. I didn't give him time to say no. I popped the latch and stepped out with the kind of body language that makes other people do what you want without thinking they redoing it. The two on the flanks came forward to crowd the grill. The middle one dropped the keys on the radiator brace to free both hands. I leaned in, found nothing in particular to adjust, and used the movement to bring my shoulder up and click the spare fob inside my shirt. The latch chucked down with that tight sound modern trucks make. I closed the hood harder than I needed to. The thunk echoing out into the wash and pretended I de-pinched my thumb so my face had a reason to look the way it did. They tried the handle. It didn't give because it was never going to. One of them walked to the tailgate and rattled it. I run a carabiner through the latch after the last time some kid stole our trash bags for a burn pile. The guy with the amber jug set it on the ground and wiped his hands on his jeans. There was a faint brown bloom on the instep of his right boot, patterned like radiator spray. That coppery color you get when a hot engine burps out water and whatever else it has got in it. They adjusted their positions to bracket me without looking like they were doing it. Up on the ridge, for a mile out, something blinked once, like an SUV parking light, proof of life, then went dark. "Let's not make this weird," the middle one said, and I heard something metal click near the guy to my right. I didn't look. I kept my voice flat and carried it just enough to hit the shoulder mic on my radio. "Maintenance to any ranger on primary," I said. "Low and even. Unknowns on Jasper claiming volunteer status. No incident number. No IC. Request verify or deny." The net held its breath. Way off on the repeater, there was a carrier squelch from a camp host mic. Then a voice I knew, but had never had reason to need said, "Copy maintenance to. No, volunteers deployed on Jasper. Stay put if safe. Move to hard cover and hold if not. I'm inbound from Yaki." The middle one smiled like I told a joke in a bad bar. "We'll drive," he said and put his fingers on the handle again. The guy on the right used a pry tool to pick at the driver door seal. They switched their radios off at the same time. The way people do when they do and want to be heard by someone else who can actually hear. I bled a little air from the rear passenger tire with the valve cap off and the press of a metal tab. It wasn't enough to strand the truck. It was enough to leave a track we could identify later if someone rolled it. I took my soft shell from behind the seat and slid under the chassis. The ground was radiating heat back into my forearms. I could smell dust and frame grease and the faint sweet of coolant that never quite leaves an old fleet truck. I pressed the radio against my jaw under the truck so I could talk without moving my lips. Holding under the vehicle, I said, "3 at least, 4th on the ridge." "Fuel present," the ranger answered with a short hum of words and breathing. "No timeline, we don't give those. People fixate on minutes in a place where moments don't mean anything." They circled. One scraped the driver's side with the pry, got nowhere, and then gave up and walked the bed rack. He found the sealed water and tapped the caps with his nail like he was checking fruit in a store. The amber jug sat in the dust like an accusation. I pushed a reflective cash sticker up into the dark under the differential where only a mechanic would look. A low-tech breadcrumb if somebody stole the truck and we needed to make sure it was ours in a lot a week from now. I tucked my knees to my chest to reduce surface area, breath like I was trying not to fog a lens, and waited for the first ripple of cooler air that says, "The night is finally winning. You learn to move when other people are looking at the wrong thing." When the night settled enough that the insects came back close, I eased along the passenger side until my hand found the key fob through my shirt. I pressed the panic button twice in quick succession, not long enough to blow the horn, just enough to tick the lights once. The headlamps on the ridge pivoted that way out of habit. I slid off the far side into the wash, felt for hard pan with my boot, and kept the truck between the men and my silhouette. No light, no sudden moves. I took a yucca stem and brushed my softer prints where the sand wanted to remember them. The only thing I lit was a red chumstick I cracked under the heel of my glove and palmed. Not for seeing things far away, but for not walking into a rock with my own teeth. The park's full of names locals use that never make it to a map. There's a sandstone alcove about a quarter-mile off the wash that crews call the Wind Caves, though they're not the famous ones down in Fish Creek. It's a shallow room scoured out by air and time with a knee-high lip and 2 tight ways in. I work toward that shape because I've sat in there on lunch breaks and out of monsoon sprinkles. And once when the truck battery died and I needed a spot to think, the men behind me looked patient on the skyline. I couldn't hear them, which didn't make me feel better. In the wash below, a cheap green laser scribbled across a boulder for a second and went dark. People buy those for cats and end up using them for things that aren't animals. It was meant to see who flinched. I kept the radio low. Moving to the alcove. No contact. Negative patient observed, I said. The ranger asked me for one cross-check. Did I see any med gear with them? I said no triage tags. No litter. No bag. No even attempt to say pulse or airway or heat illness by degree. If you're with a sick person, you talk about numbers without remembering you're doing it. All they had was a word they thought would move me. The alcove held cool in its back wall. I crawled over the lip and settled behind a swell in the floor that put stone between me and the wash. I elevated my feet on my pack for a minute to chase the heat out of my calves and took one measured mouthful of water. I kept the bottle cap in my palm so it wouldn't clack against rock. I ratcheted the squelch down to the edge of silence. Somewhere above, a night bird made the sound it always makes. Farther up canyon, an engine coughed twice and died like an old truck trying to move to a better vantage and failing at it. They tried a voice, not loud. Maintenance, someone called from the wash. We've got him. He's bad. There's a way someone says that when they know who you are and what you know. They like to use your language back at you, but it never fits right. They should have given me a location marker, or a seat of pain, or a skin check, or a request for a litter and a tarp. They said none of that. The tone was to clean. I kept my mouth closed and watched the dust drift at the lip of the alcove. The sets of feet scuffed past. Not close. Testing a perimeter they didn't want to walk into. They went back up to the ridge because they liked being taller than the ground. Pre-dawn is the only mercy out there. The heat finally drops out of the frame rails and your brain lets the words you rehearsed all night line up. I listened to my watch tick because there was nothing else to hang time on. The first blue came in that skinny line over the hills. A single figure stepped into the wash and didn't turn on a light. He made 2 quick taps on his radio mic, the kind of sound a tongue makes on the roof of a mouth, and gave the short whistle crews use when the net is too busy for words. I showed hands first and stood slow. He didn't ask if I was all right. He asked if I was armed. I said, "No." "Good," he said. "We're walking. We took the long route that keeps you off the ridge lines and out of sight of skylines." He stopped every short stretch and knelt to look at the sand. He could read a night in the marks people leave the way a carpenter reads grain. When we got to a bench, he let me look back with him. The headlamps were there, 3 faint whites against the pale coming up behind them, spaced the same way they had been the first time I saw them. They watched. They did not follow. They were going to risk whatever they deplanned now that a ranger and a marked truck were the same picture. We slipped the last mile to a turnout off S22 that isn't the obvious one. He got on the radio and said the bare minimum to get other bodies moving the right pieces. Maintenance to secured. Vehicle on Jasper. Unknowns observed Rich North. No contact. He gave me a bottle of warm Gatorade that still tasted like a good decision and told me to hold there. Another ranger went up with a deputy later and brought the truck back with Primarks photographed. Prints swabbed and the reflective sticker I'd shoved under the differential pulled off with a laugh. The flat rear tire told them where it had sat and for how long. I didn't ride along. They didn't ask. Back at the yard, the brightness of everything felt wrong. Like it does when you've been awake too long and noise gets edges. I signed my cash manifest closed with a note. Deployment interrupted. Incident managed by Ranger. And put the bed rack back in order. Someone handed me a 1-page non-disclosure in the break room where we keep the extra gloves and the box fan. Ongoing investigation, they said. Pleasant and tired. I read it and signed it without asking what exactly I was agreeing not to repeat, because we both knew the thing that matters in a place like this is that people keep coming back with stories that end at home. The ranger wrote a separate supplement that I never saw. The incident log for the broken axle turned into a maintenance anomaly sideline. Paper has a way of moving facts where you'd never think to find them. 2 weeks later, the detective, who still wears his badge on a metal chain and likes to stand in doorways, came by. He said 3 men were picked up in Ocado, Wells, in the middle of the night with a bed full of catalytic converters and stolen tools. He said one of their boots had a stain they were pretty sure matched something they desampled out of my truck door seam. He said, "Thanks for the phone call, like I done more than whisper the truth into a radio and hold still for it to work." He didn't write my name down. I watched the pen. It stayed in his shirt pocket. The second fob on the lanyard never left my neck through any of this, and it hasn't since. I take it into the shower and set it on the soap tray where I can see it. It isn't superstition. It's a checklist item with better manners. I added a line to the back of my field card where I keep the notes. I don't want to learn again. Verify call signs. Challenge OES resource numbers. No transport without an IC. Don't unlock for anyone whose story skips the parts that take time. Use the terrain, not the truck. Keep one piece of proof in a place thieves don't think to touch. If you have to pick between talking and staying small, stay small and make the radio do the talking for you. The park never changes in the ways that count. The wind still picks up around dusk and rattles the brittle things. The cicadas still drill that one note into your skull until you forget it's there. The road still goes gravel, then sand, then a line that doesn't exist until someone draws it again with their tires. They moved me to sign maintenance for a while after that. Boards, bolts, the small, honest work that doesn't ask you to be brave. I still take the white truck out when they need a body to haul water. It still runs hot on Montezuma grade if you're greedy with the AC. When the needle drifts, I crack the window and listen to the sound the tires make on the first washboard. It's clean and dumb and perfect in a way that keeps you out of your own head. If you want a moral, go rent it somewhere else. This isn't a lesson, it's just what happened. 3 headlamps move smooth in the wrong place at the wrong hour. And they met a ranger who walks without making noise and a maintenance tech who knows the difference between a form worth signing and a favor that gets people killed. The only person who needed to remember my name was me. And I haven't had trouble with that since I started wearing the lanyard under my shirt. The radio sits on its charger now with the volume turned down low, and when it hisses in the evening, I feel the muscles in my forearms answer. I don't tell this story on the net. I tell it here once and then I get back in the truck and go where they send me. There's always another cache to stage before the heat makes the rest of the choices for you. I run steel between Monticello and Moab often enough to know where the road pinches and where it lets you breathe. That night, I had a 48 feet flatbed under me with 2 bundles of I-beam and a stack of C-channel strapped down tight. It was early spring, the kind of storm that drops off the Abajo without warning. Dispatch pushed a weather alert at 2046. Sheet lightning flooded shoulders around Indian Creek. I signed the bill of lighting at the yard. Checked tread. Checked wipers. Checked that my ABS warning stayed out. And I said company policy to myself like a prayer. Do not stop on an unlit shoulder. Call it in and keep rolling. Doors locked at all times. Re-enter traffic only from a safe turnout. I've said those lines out loud to rookies. It's different when you have to use them. By 2110, the rain had turned the red rock black. Paint lines floated off the pavement like strings when the wipers missed a beat. I settled at 48 and kept the RPMs up to keep the alternator happy with everything on. Hands at 8 and 4, no radio chatter. A sedan bobbed past southbound, lights smeared by water. And then it was just me and the white noise on the glass. I kept an eye on the mile markers. 6365. I started thinking about a story our safety guy likes to tell about staged breakdowns. How they depend on one thing, You giving them the exact move they need, which is you stopping right there where they have the angles. I didn't like thinking about it. I don't want to drive by people who need help. 2 summers ago outside Green River, I did stop. It was a mother with a sick kid held under a blanket. I could feel the heat coming off him through the fabric. I pulled up to a lit pull-out 50 yards ahead called Highway Patrol. Grabbed the bottled water I keep in the footwell. That night went the way you want a night to go. It sits in my head next to the policy like two magnets that don't want to touch. At 2,135, I topped a small rise before mile 67 and the lightning opened the world for a second. Hazards up ahead. Hood up. Trunk popped a hair. Someone stepped into my lane and waved me down. Not the frantic windmilling you see when a tire explodes and whoever's out there is trying to make any car stop. This was a chest-high palm. 2, 3 beats time to my brake light pulses. I know that sounds odd, but that's exactly how it looked. He'd practiced off the reflection. My stomach said no. I bumped the Jake 1 notch, not to slow, just to put some voice in the rain. Eased left to ride the center and watched the guardrail on the far side. 2 shapes crouched where the rail meets a drainage cut. They weren't watching the sedan. Their heads tracked my tractor. I didn't stop. I kept the wheels straight, doors locked, windows up, and gave myself to feet on the sedan as I passed. The guy in the lane didn't flinch like a startled motorist would. He peeled his hand down slow and pivoted with me. I said, on northbound US 191. Mile 67, silver sedan with hazards, possible ambush indicators. I'm not stopping. I'm continuing to the gravel pade, for mile north. Request a unit. The dispatcher asked for my rig description. Direction. Speed. I gave all of it steady distance to the next turnout. No hero talk. She said the nearest trooper had just cleared a stop south of me and would shadow my return. Do not make contact, she said. Copy. The gravel pad at 2,140 was soup. I eased in shallow, though I could pull straight back out without spinning the trailer. Hazards on. Engine gear. Foot on the surface brake while I thought through what I was going to do. This is the part where you decide the rest of your night. You can throw yourself into the story you want to tell later. How you jumped out. How you helped. Or you can stick to the script that gets you home. I set 3 options in my head. If they came to me, I stayed in the cab and called it in again. If they sat, I would roll back slow enough to keep eyes on distance. If anything shifted toward this pad, I left and met the trooper farther up. I told dispatch I'd do a rolling return at 25 to observe from a distance. She said the unit would be behind me, unlit and to maintain movement. I nosed out at 2,144 and merged with my blinker solid. No erratic flashes to read as panic. The storm had settled into curtains. You could part with your beams for only a second at a time. I ran the right tires near the crown where the water sheds. Eyes on the left mirror for that second set of headlights. They showed up like a low glow. No bar lights. No wigwag. Just a car that stayed where a car stays when it doesn't want to be seen. I let my speed find 22 and stayed there. The waveman stepped wider into the lane when I came on, palm out like before. The crouch shapes lifted as my trailer midpoint drew even with the sedan's rear bumper. Out of the southbound cut, a second vehicle snapped its nose toward my ICC bar to box the sedan against me if I stopped. It was the move our safety guy talks about. Make the truck be your wall. I didn't brake. I fed torque and kept the trailer true. At that speed and weight, small inputs matter. The boxing car needed angle to take the spot behind my trailer. Angle on wet gravel steals traction. Its rear wheels climbed the berm, lost it, and the car slew. Bumper kissing the guardrail hard enough to rattle itself silly. The sedan tried to drop its hood. The trooper chose that second to light the world. He slid up dark so close I could see the rivets in his push bar when the blues hit. He didn't do anything dramatic. He put his car at an angle that made leaving a bad idea and staying the only option. I gave myself room and kept rolling to mile 68 where there's space. I didn't touch the horn. I didn't curse. I kept breathing like I was backing into a dock with a board guy waving me back and a different board guy staring at his clipboard. The dispatcher said, "Good work. Continue to 68. Unit will meet you. Do not return to scene." At 2152, I set my brakes in the pad at 68 and watched rain ladder down the glass. I wrote everything before it got fuzzy. Time I first saw them. Light timing against my brakes. The crouched heads following me like a cat follows a toy. I wrote what the waveman said when I went by. Hey, brother, not sir, and not help. It matters when you tell a story later. People use their words different when they're scared. The trooper came at 2210, calm like he'd been here before. He took my license and registration, asked for the log page, asked if I had dash cam. I did. Forward wide angle and a cabin cam that shows my hands. I mirrored the car to his tablet right there and we scrubbed the footage together, frame by frame. The wave was exactly what I thought, timed to the afterglow of my brake lights on the wet pavement. The crouched figures didn't shift their focus until my cab passed. Then their chins tracked the trailer like they were counting off feet. You could see the dark spot in the southbound cut where the boxing car waited outside my headlight cone. The trooper nodded once. We've had chatter about a crew trying this. The rain makes people second-guess themselves. He handled it right. He didn't add anything warm to that. It didn't need warmth. I filed a near miss through our company app at 2238. Route conditions actions taken. Involvement of law enforcement. No contact. No injuries. Dash cam uploaded. Safety flagged mile 67 for night weather runs and pushed a note to other drivers. The trooper told me not to swing back by the scene and not to loiter. He said they'd call if they needed a written statement beyond what I'd given him, and they let me go. I drove to Moab in the quiet end of the storm. When the rain backs off, you can hear the hiss of your tires like breath in a bottle, and it makes you think about things you don't want to. I thought about the kid near Green River. That night, the mother waved different, bigger. Then, backed away from the road like she was trying not to spook anything. She kept looking at her car, not at me. I pulled ahead to a lit turnout, called it in, and waited in the cab with the doors locked until the trooper slid in behind me. When I walked back, I did it with someone already on scene. That was the difference. It was controlled. What happened at 67 lives in the opposite of control? You think you can tell the difference quickly out there. Some nights you can. Some nights a man waves with his palm at chest height to the beat of your own brake lights and you know he picked you and not anyone else. The follow-up came 2 days later while I was fueling and landing. Same trooper, same calm voice. They'd set a sting with a marked unit a half mile back and an unmarked up front. The dashcam angles helped them map the ruts and the dry spot under the tamarisk where the boxing car waited. They rolled the crew without a fight. He said my footage put their timing together. He said again that I handled 67 right. I thanked him, hung up, and clicked the nozzle back into its slot. There's no parade in that kind of call. It's just the right thing happening later than your heartbeat wanted. I still run that road. I still look at 67 when the mile marker flashes by. The company policy sits folded in my clipboard and I keep reading it like it's new. Do not stop on an unlit shoulder. Call it in. Keep rolling. Make your own safe turnout. Doors locked. It's dry language that keeps you whole. When the night is long and the highway gives you more glass than lane, I think about the man's wave and how it matched my lights. I think about what my hands did not do. They did not turn toward the shoulder. I wish the rules weren't necessary. I wish every hazard with a hood up was a mother with a feverish kid and a pull out just ahead. But I don't drive the world I wish. I drive the one that's painted in white dashes and mile markers and water pooling where the asphalt sags. The trooper shook my hand and said, I did it right. That helps. It doesn't take away the quiet part that sticks, which is the line I crossed by not stopping, and how that line also brought me home. When I clear Moab before dawn, I let the rig drift a hair from the flood dark shoulder, hold the lane steady, and carry both truths like weight I know how to tie down. I make my living doing small jobs from Sultan City down to Okado. In the summer, I work early and late to avoid the worst heat, but August never makes it easy. I keep spare belts, coolant, and water in the truck because something always fails out there. My friend Louise called near dusk to say his serpentine belt had come apart and he limped his old Jeep to a stop just past the start of Sandstone Canyon. He had shade and a little water, but not enough to wait until morning. I told him to stay put and not walk the wash after dark. I loaded 6-gallon jugs, the right belt, and to traction boards, then rolled out from Okado Wells while there was still color in the sky. The thermometer at the station said 108. Over the Valista Mountains, I could see lightning flattening against the clouds. That meant rain somewhere up drain. I didn't love that, but I knew the lines in Fish Creek, and I knew where the bank sat high. I took Split Mountain Road down into the wash. Heat shimmer ran across the hard pan, and the truck's fin cycled on and off. I aired the tires too. 18 psi at the turnoff and dropped into Fish Creek. The main channel was dry and pale. I set the cruise low. Windows cracked just enough to hear my tires. It's a habit. You can hear a change in sand before you feel it. I passed the usual landmarks. The sharp elbow near the first low bluff and the broad pad where folks park for the hike into Split Mountain. The scent was dust, hot oil, and something chemical from an old spill near the picnic site. Lightning popped again to the west, but there was no wind shift yet. I kept a mental note. Don't dull in the low spots. Face uphill where I can, and always leave a way out. A few minutes down the wash, I saw a white pickup sitting oddly near the center line. It rode a little high on the downstream side, tailgate down, cooler on the gate like a sign. Someone had tied a bleached flag to a shovel stuck in the sand. That isn't how the regulars mark anything. You don't need flags here. The wash tells you where to go. A man in a ball cap came out from the shade under the bed and waved both arms for me to pull closer. 50 yards short, I angled the truck so I could back out the way I came. I killed the radio and kept the engine idle. He called that they were out of water and stuck. He pointed to the strap at his bumper and told me to back to it. I looked where he pointed. Fresh cars to neat, stood in a row leading to a side braid most folks avoid because it slumps after even a small flow. Across that line, a tow strap ran half buried under the sand. I saw a shadow of a trench about a foot deep trailing from it. A length of something rigid. Rebar or a toss showed an inch above the surface where your tire would roll if you followed those rocks. The pickup's rear axle was perched like it was sitting on a mound under the sand, and the tailgate's dust looked undisturbed. The cooler had no condensation. Inside the cab, a second man stared at me instead of at the supposed problem. I caught the smell of hot brakes, but my truck was cool, and I hadn't been driving hard. That smell wasn't mine, and the white truck hadn't moved. I don't argue in spots like that. I set the belt down on the wash near my front tire where they could see it. I told the man I'd detoss the gallons from where I sat and call in help from the lot. He told me the sand was firmer by the strap and I should pull forward and nose in. No one who knows the place says that the strap is exactly where the sand is weakest after a surge. Like a rug that's been pulled and not smoothed back. I shook my head, lifted the gallons from the crate, and walked them 10 steps past my bumper. Keeping the truck between us, I set them on the sand and backed away. He didn't bend to grab them. He stared past me toward a tight bend up the wash where the walls pinch. That bend is a trap for the unwary. If someone blocks it, you don't have room to turn around. I didn't like that he kept glancing there. I climbed in, reversed, and took the wider arc toward the north bank, leaving the fake car line on my left. The cab door of the white pickup opened, and the second man slid out. Both of them started jogging along the edge of the wash as if to beat me to that pinch. My truck in a race car on sand. I didn't try to outrun them on the flat. I aimed for the next dry fall, one of those 3 or 4 feet steps with a ripple of baked mudstone that turns into a chute when water runs. I knew the bench above it held firm. If I could get the truck up and parked on that bench, I'd have the only high ground for 100 yards. I put the tires at the base of the ripple and set the parking brake. I took my tow strap, tossed the free end over a lip, and scrambled up, using it like a hand line. Dust made the rock slick under my boots. I dug the tread in and hauled myself onto the bench, looped the strap around a clump of roots, and pulled it tight to give me a point to lean against. I slid back down, set the traction boards on the ripple, and eased the truck forward in low gear. The front tires bit and climbed. The rear followed with a small slide. I kept the throttle steady and brought the truck up onto the bench, then straightened it and let it idle. From there, I could see upwash to the pinch and downwash to the line of fake rocks. The two men reached the dry fall a minute later. The first one yelled that I couldn't park up there because of fines. He said vehicles weren't allowed where I was. That's not a rule at that spot. And even if it were, he wasn't anyone to enforce it. I didn't answer. I stood 5 trillion back from the lip with the engine running behind me. I watched their eyes. They weren't looking for a safe path. They were looking for mine. Then a sound rose from up the wash. Not an echo or anything strange, just the real noise of water working across sand. It started as a soft drag, the way burlap or carpet sounds when pulled across a floor. A thin sheet of water came around the bend barely above the ankles and pushed a tongue of sand in front of it like a slow conveyor. I took 2 steps farther from the lip. The bench I was on had old stain lines a foot above my boots, proof of flows that had come through years before. I parked farther back than those lines for exactly this reason. The men looked upstream and then back at me, measuring whether they could still beat the water around the pinch and climb. The first sheet wrapped the base of the ripple. The second pulse came darker with silt, smoothed away footprints, and chewed the edges of the trench where the strap was buried. I saw the rebar flash clear for half a second, enough to confirm what I suspected, and then the sand swallowed it again. The white pickup shifted. The rear lifted a little, rotated, and kissed the far bank. It hadn't been stuck. It had been placed to block and bait. The two men tried to climb. One slipped and slid knee-deep into the flow. The other hauled him by the elbow onto a ledge barely wide enough to stand. They looked for a different path up, but didn't find one. The strap the men had buried went taut as the water tightened the sand around it, then went slack and snaked free. It ran in a quick arc downstream and vanished under the brown water. I didn't shout, didn't taunt, didn't offer a line. They had a truck and they had lines. What they didn't have now was a way to get to me quickly. The wash was doing the blocking. I kept the engine idling so the lights would stay strong and the power steering would be ready if undercutting started. The sand in these spots can look solid and then fall away 6 in at a time. I watched for that. The water rose to mid-thigh near the pinch, then fell back, then rose again as another pulse arrived. It wasn't a wall, it was a steady, heavy push. The men waited on their ledge, wet from the waist down, breathing hard. They weren't going to drown where they stood. They had a way up once the pulse passed and the sand tightened again. I let time do its work. 30 minutes stretched to 40. The pickup shifted another foot and settled, nose down into a new curve. The water was cutting downstream. The channel sucked itself into a deeper line. Upstream, the surface flattened to a brown mirror and then wrinkled again as the surge eased. When the sound dropped from a rush to a hiss, I checked the bench edge for fresh cracks. None. I turned the truck toward the broad fan that leads to higher flats on the north side. I idled off the bench with careful throttle, easing over the ripple where my boards still sat. I retrieved them, stowed the strap, and took the wide arc to the legal approach into Sandstone Canyon, staying well away from edges that had been cut fresh. The men never left their ledge while I watched. Maybe they did later. The desert doesn't explain itself after midnight. It just records what you did. I picked up Luis near the mouth of Sandstone where the canyon narrows. His headlamp bounced in the distance. He had the shredded belt wrapped around his wrist and his voice sounded dry. We walked back to my truck with the new belt and a small socket kit. No talking about the men. There wasn't anything to do about them without making a different problem. I parked the truck on a high spot and we waited for dawn. Heat bled out of the ground, but not by much. The air dropped to 92 and stuck there. We slept in turns with the windows down only an inch, just enough to keep the cab from turning into an oven. A few bats stitched the air above the wash. The wind smelled like wet clay near the bend and hot dust everywhere else. At first light, we eased along the proper line into sandstone. Louis's Jeep sat where he said, tilted but not badly. We set rocks as chocks and pulled the tensioner with a cheater bar, routed the new belt the right way, and spun each pulley by hand to check for wobble. The alternator spun clean, the idler felt smooth. We topped off coolant and oil, let it idle, and listened for a whine. Nothing. He looked like a person again after half a gallon of water and a few sips of the electrolyte packet I handed him. Around 8, 2 friends from Ocado, Wells, rolled up in an old Tacoma with more water and a flat of cold cans for our cooler. We laughed because that's what you do after you made it through a dumb night without making it worse. On the way out, we passed the white pickup. It had settled into the far bank at an angle, half filled with silt to the door seams. The tailgate was still down. Footprints led from the ledge to a worn path up the side where anyone would climb once the water stepped down. No one was around. I didn't look long. The cannons that had pointed to the trap still stood, a neat row against the slope sand. Downstream of the pinch, the wash had carved a fresh curve that would confuse anyone coming in after dark. We drove past and kept our eyes on the safe line, which is a wide arc hugging the higher side. In full sun, the correct route is obvious. At night, tired and thirsty, it's easy to believe whatever the rocks tell you. The next weekend, a few of us came back with a shovel and a bucket. We didn't hold a meeting, we just cleared what needed. Clearing, we knocked down the fake cars and stacked proper markers where the line holds after a flow. We scratched an arrow into a patch of hard pan upstream of the pinch where it would last through a couple of storms. We cut a length of strap we found half buried and tossed it in the bed of the Tacoma so it would tempt anyone else to get creative. Nobody posted about it or tried to make a story out of it at the bar. The fix was for the people who actually drive the wash, not for attention. That's how most problems get sorted out here. I thought about those men sitting on the ledge while the first pulses pushed by. I am not proud of staring down from the bench with my engine idling and doing nothing to help. It felt cold in the moment, but out there, you learn what you're responsible for. I was responsible for not getting boxed in, for not letting a bad plan drag my truck into a blind corner, and for getting Louise out without adding a search to the list of problems. The water did the rest. It moved sand, cut a new line, and made their plan fall apart without anyone getting hurt that I could see. A week later, I drove Fish Creek at noon to check the route. The new Chirons stood in the right places. Tire marks curved along the high side like they should. The pinch still had the fresh channel, but the arrow in the hard pan stood out enough to guide anyone with sense. The white pickup was gone, either dug out or hauled away, but the wash kept the scar where it had pressed into the bank. I slowed, looked once, and rolled on. The heat pressed up from the ground. Cicadas ran their steady racket. The air smelled like hot gypsum and oil. Nothing dramatic. No lesson spelled out. Just one near miss turned into a clean line and a reminder that at night in August in that part of Ons Borgo, the safest move is usually the one that sets you on higher ground with your nose pointed out. That's the only rule I cut. I was 12 in the summer of 2021 when my sisters decided we needed one night under a big sky to shake off the lockdown fog. We drove down I-77 toward Rock Hill, South Carolina. The plan was simple: visit the Catawba Cultural Center before closing, eat on Cherry Road, then sleep one night somewhere quiet near the river. We should have booked a site at Lansford Canal State Park or stayed in town, but we talked ourselves into a quick camp because it was just one night and we were tired of being indoors. I'm writing this to set it down in a clean order with times and places, so I don't keep moving the details around in my head. We got off I-77 at exit 82 and grabbed food on Cherry Road. People were friendly. We reached the cultural center in late afternoon and walked the outdoor exhibits until closing, read plaques, and kept our voices low. I remember the heat coming off the wooden rails and the shade feeling still. When the staff locked up, we drove out along Mount Gallant Road. A gap in the trees showed a flat pull-off with sandy soil and a thin stand of hardwoods. No sign said to camp there. No sign said not to. Landry, my oldest sister, parked the car, nose out because she always does that. We set a tourist tent, kept the fire to a small ring of fist-sized rocks, and ate in the car to keep bugs off our food. There were small things we noticed and dismissed. A length of orange ribbon on a sapling was tied upside down, like a marker someone retied wrong. There was a cold fire scar in the sand with fingernail-like grooves around it, not ours. Along the brush edge, 3 stones sat in a neat row. We joked a kid did it. We didn't touch them. The air smelled clean, a little metallic after the heat. Baseline sounds were normal. A few frogs, a distant truck on Mount Galong, and the engine ticking as it cooled. At about 11:45 p.m., Ariana, my middle sister, went to bed. Landry and I stayed by the coals to look at the Milky Way. The sky looked wide and steady. We talked about school and how quiet the world had been for too long. The wind at ground level died to nothing. I kept my shoes on because the sand felt a little cold through the tarp. The only light was the ember glow, and the stars. At around 12:23 a.m., something made a low, wet growl in the brush behind us. It was short and pushed enough air to wrinkle the surface of the water in my cup once. We both heard it. I turned my head and the hair at the back of my neck lifted. The night didn't get colder. It got heavier. Pulling a breath felt like a task. The frog call stopped in under 10 seconds like someone cut power to them. We stayed still and listened, trying to place it. Then Ariana's voice came out of the trees. "Come here." It sounded like a recording through a damaged speaker, not like a person. The consonants had a static edge. Landry and I turned to the tent. I could see Ariana's outline on her side, breathing slow, her arm curled under her head. 5 seconds later, the same voice came from the opposite side of camp, farther off. Same pace and tone, no footsteps in between. I remember the taste of ash in my mouth and the feeling that I needed to stand up and couldn't. I reached for the small flashlight. Ariana left near the stones. Landry said, "Don't." I already clicked it. The beam cut into the brush in a flat white cone. Something shifted behind a trunk and stepped once into the edge of the light. It stood the size of a man, but the proportions were off. The upper arms were long from shoulder to elbow. When it stepped, the foot planted to first and then dropped the heel late, like a joint was reversed. It were old torn clothes that hung without sitting right on the body. The eyes reflected the beam like an animal's would, flat and bright. Then the head lifted fully and my stomach flipped. It had Ariana's face, not a mask, not face paint, a close copy that didn't fit the bones underneath. The mouth sat a little too low, the cheekbones weren't in the right place. It spoke again in that damaged speaker tone. "Come here, Ladybug. That is my nickname. We had not used it that day." The heat from the flashlight pressed into my palm and my legs wouldn't answer. Landry didn't. Breathe for a second, then it started using our earlier talk like bait. It repeated Landry's highway joke. It played the line I'd said about the sky. It hummed the tune Ariana had half sung while packing the cooler. The order was wrong, like someone shuffled clips and didn't care if the sequence made sense. It tried another voice. Our mother's. Not perfect, more like a memory of her voice. "Seatbelts," it said. The hairs on my arms lifted straight. Landry grabbed my elbow and pulled us backward into the tent. We landed hard on our knees. Ariana jerked awake, blinking. Landry didn't explain. She said, "Shoes, keys." Ariana saw Landry's face and moved without questions. Outside, something circled the tent once. Fabric depressed at my right shoulder like a palm through nylon. A slow scrape ran along a stake head. Metal against something hard. A guideline buzzed for half a second as if it had been plucked. The voice pressed close to the wall at my ear, quiet and exact. Open up. First as Ariana, then as me, a little too low like it was testing the pitch. We went. I unzipped and we ran in a line for the car. The flashlight jumped the ground and caught 3 details I can still list. 1. A set of bare footprints at the edge of our fire scar, toes pointed toward the tent. The stride length didn't match the size. 2. A half-eaten apple from our cooler sitting on the hood, bite mark wide at the front and narrow at the back, the shape wrong for a human jaw. 3. The row of 3 stones had been straightened into a pointer aimed at the trees we'd been staring into earlier. The door shut and the locks clicked. Landry turned the key. The engine caught immediately. Headlights washed over the 2 rut track, and the figure stepped into the center of it like it had been standing just out of view, waiting for the light. The face slid once, not changing features, just resetting them into the positions it wanted, and the eyes flared again in the beams. It tried more lures. It used my nickname. It said a line our dad uses to tease us about snacks. Then it tried our mother's voice again. Girls, be nice. The pace and volume stayed steady. It did not rush. Landry said, hold on, and pressed the gas. The figure did not jump on the hood. It tilted its body at the hips, the top half moving before the lower half, and the car passed. In the rear-view mirror, it was already upright again in one motion, turned to face the tail lights. It did not chase. It just watched us go until the track curved and the trees blocked the view. We reached Mount Gallant, then Cherry Road. Landry kept the high beams on. Oncoming cars flashed us and she didn't turn them down. We took one wrong turn and corrected. At a gas station near Cherry Road, we pulled into fast and parked crooked under the fluorescents. The normal sound of a pump clicking on the other side of the island made my hands stop shaking as fast. We sat there until another car pulled in beside us, and the presence of strangers in a lit space let my breathing even out. We got a room at a hotel near exit 82. We triple locked the door and pushed a chair under the knob because it felt like something to do. I couldn't sleep. I lay on the bed and searched on my phone. I typed voice mimic, long limbs, eyes reflect, lures, witch, shapeshifter. I found posts about skinwalkers. I'm not claiming expertise on anybody's culture. I am saying those pages were the first thing I had read that matched the facts I had in front of me. A familiar voice used to draw you away, a face borrowed to lower your guard, silence in the woods before it speaks, and a patient way of standing in your path to make you choose wrong. At sunrise, Landry checked the car. On the dusty trunk lid were 3 smudged prints that could have been palms or feet. The shape suggested more than the usual number of joint points. On the bumper was a single long dark hair. It looked normal until we rolled it between our fingers. It felt flat. We didn't argue about going back for our gear. We were in agreement. We would not return to that pull-off. We did go back to the cultural center during open hours. We did not ask for a tour. We did not ask for stories. We went to the front desk and apologized for camping where we shouldn't have. We said we heard voices we could not explain. That a person with a face that looked like my sister stood at our camp and that we ran and left our things. The staff were calm and respectful. They told us plainly that unauthorized camping was not allowed and gave us state park options for the future if we wanted to be near the river. They said not to go back to retrieve anything and that they would pass word to the right people. There was no lecture, just clear rules and the kind of look that says don't do that again here. We understood. We drove home that afternoon in the car when our mom said seat belts. My muscles jerked before I could control it. We told her the story in a single piece without drama, sticking to what we saw and heard and what we did. We did not try to prove anything. We focused on the choices we made and the ones we would not make again. A week later, we got a short call confirming our bag and tent had been collected and disposed of. No extra detail. No request for us to return. That message closed the last loop we had left open. The aftermath for me is simple to describe and hard to live with. I measure nights against that one. If a voice calls me in the dark, I verify with my eyes before I move. And if even one thing is off, I don't go. I don't camp where it isn't allowed, not for a photo, not to save time, not because it seems quiet and no one will care. I keep small rules that help me feel in control. I park nose out. I keep my shoes by the door. I listen for baseline sounds, bugs, birds, highway noise, and if they drop out all at once, I pay attention. There are details I hold onto because they keep the memory exact. The ripple in the cup from a single growl, the air getting heavy without cooling, the way the same voice came from two directions without steps in between, the toe first foot placement and the late heel, the eyes reflecting like an animal's while a human face tried to sit right on top, the use of my nickname when no one had said it, the apple on our hood with wrong bite marks, the row of stones straightened to point where we had been looking, the prints on the trunk lid with too many joint points, the flat hair. I can't name what stood there. I don't need to. The facts are enough. We camped somewhere we shouldn't have. Something watched us long enough to copy our words and pull from older family phrases. It tried to separate us with a voice and a face. We left together. That's the part that ends the story in the right place for me. We were lucky and we listened to the person who said move now. If you ever hear someone you love call you from the dark, check with your eyes before you answer. If there is anything off, don't go. That is my rule. It kept me alive once. I intend to keep it.